I'd like to respond to Cadicus the Dam's video giving up libertarianism, where he asks a very valid question, and it's a shame to see so many thumbs down for the question, because it's quite valid and a question that I think that should be thought about. Basically, the first thing I'd like to say is that there are different types of libertarianism. When someone says libertarianism, it's like saying democracy. There's going to be different ideas about how a democratic government is run. Like, you might think that every single decision needs to be voted on by the people, but then you might think, that will take a little bit too much effort and people won't be able to get on with their lives. So then you hire representatives, and like, how much should the representatives take care of things? And there's all different kinds of ideas about how things should actually work. But the general idea for me, and the way I understand libertarianism, is a government that influences what it's supposed to influence. So, and the idea of government itself, like, I am a government of my own body and my own surroundings. That's the way I see it. So say I'm growing something in my backyard. The only people who should decide what I'm allowed to grow in my backyard is whoever is going to influence. And if I'm growing like raspberries or herbs or something that isn't going to blow up, the federal government shouldn't come along and decide what I'm allowed to grow in my garden or not. And that is really what libertarians hate about the current system, is that the government comes along and tells you how you can do things that only influence you at times, like taking drugs. Like, that only influences you, and it only influences your own health, and yet the government sees it fit to come along and tell you what to do. In cases where you are growing something in your backyard, like a nuclear bomb, and it does have the potential to influence other people, especially in a negative way, certainly I believe that you're going to have to take steps to do it. If a guy is standing in the backyard and they have a gun pointed at your head and they're about to shoot you, it isn't the libertarian view to stand there and say, go ahead and shoot me, I'm a libertarian, I'm not going to do anything to stop you because that gun is your property. Obviously, I think most libertarians would take drastic steps to stop that from happening, if they're sure that that is what the person is intending to do. And I guess the question is, should the government kind of allow the person to have a gun in the first place? Well, now it gets really complicated, because who's to decide who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? Yes, certainly, personally, you would think that you are the right person to have a gun, but the other guy shouldn't. That's where the decision making comes in. And I think when people like Ron Paul say that somebody should be allowed to have a nuclear weapon or not, they're not saying it because they feel like the person is going to, like, it's not like they know that the person is going to blow up the whole country and start a nuclear war. They just feel that the best decision at the time is to kind of leave the people alone and not make those decisions for them, because that will kind of piss them off more. Say that the guy didn't want to shoot you, and he just wanted to shoot weasels in his cabbage patch or something, and you go over there annoying him and you call the police on him, all the stuff, that would actually kind of make him want to shoot you more. And if you were unable to prevent him from getting a gun in the future, whereas before he had absolutely no reason to shoot you, now he would certainly have a really good one because you're fucking annoying and he wants to kill you. So I think that's when you hear libertarians talk about that kind of stuff. They're coming from obviously an empathetic kind of view that everyone should have rights, and everyone is a grown person and needs to decide what they can and can't do, and that's just the decision they made. And it can be argued whether North Korea should have nuclear weapons, of course, and the price that we would say attacking North Korea right now would also come into question. And there's a lot of different issues that certainly need to be discussed. But I think when people see these libertarian arguments narrowed down, and they hear from Paul say, oh, we should leave these people alone because of this and this, he's not really saying that we should do nothing in those situations. It's just he feels that that's the best decision in that point in time. And since the government is a group in itself and they're deciding what, who gets the nuclear weapons or not, then what if the government becomes pretty fucking bad and you don't want them to have a nuclear weapon? Well, now they have a nuclear weapon to attack you and you don't have a nuclear weapon to attack them. So I guess you're kind of just putting faith that your government is a group of people that is good, and it's certainly, North Korea is a government and it's not good, and they would decide who has a nuclear weapon or not. There isn't any ideology that is going to be perfect, and whenever you narrow your view to just one ideology, that's when you start having problems. And anything is like that, religion as well. Like, yes, it's good to follow one religion, whatever it may be, even if you don't have a religion. It's good to follow that to a point, but you need to have like a little bit, like 10%. First of all, choose, a good religion to follow or a good person to follow that helps you improve your life. But, always have that little bit of openness to yourself, because, as you can see, the world changes all the time and there's always new ideas coming along. Even though something is great and works well and certainly needs to keep working, and we learn what works based on experience, that doesn't mean we should like completely cut off any kind of creativity and any kind of thought, and it doesn't mean we should like maybe break the rules once in a while. But as a whole, the idea of libertarianism and the libertarian influence at this point in time, it can only be positive, because the government has its foot in so much shit that it really shouldn't have. And if we don't deal with the big issues, let's at least address the little issues where the government should really stay the fuck out of our way and treat us as adults and not like little kids. So to change I hope you don't change your whole ideology because of one question, but it's quite difficult, and it is a difficult question to think about. But look, the other thing I'll say is that if people, like, how easy is it to make a nuclear weapon? Like, if everybody could just go poof and get a nuclear weapon, could you really stop people from doing it? And to what lengths, what kind of world would you create? And what lengths would you go to stop that? Like, what if nuclear weapons were made out of candy or something? Like, would you stop everyone from having candy as well? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things to consider. Obviously, nuclear weapons take a few people to make, and how many people need to come together to decide that a certain person should have a nuclear weapon, and it's almost like a government in itself, and that's what governments are. Governments are supposedly representatives of groups of people. So to say that a government should be able to choose who is to have a nuclear weapon or not is no different to that radical Christian group who you so hate, saying whether you should have a nuclear weapon or not to defend yourself against them. If your government is good, that's awesome. Like, yes, that's the right choice. But again, the problem is that your government might not be good, and like, who's to say? That's the whole like issue. And yeah, like, I guess people will kind of do what they want to do in the end, and they'll just still decide for themselves who should have what. But just be careful, because if you tell the wrong person, and a lot of people disagree with you being the good person, well, they might just gang up against you and and stop you, and while you're screaming, Well, I'm sure North Korea also wouldn't want anyone else near them to have a nuclear weapon too, but you can see the irony of them telling like South Korea, and that's like from our point of view, but obviously if they're the bad guy, alright, let's just say North Korea is the bad guy, but you can see how them screaming at South Korea not to have a nuclear weapon would be quite stupid. And if the people had any sense in North Korea, they would tell them, like, no, don't take sanctions out on South Korea, because we're the bad guys. Like, no, let them have a nuclear weapon if they want to. That's what I would do if I was in I wouldn't want to be in North Korea. And another thing is, you certainly have to put trust in, again, like, you gotta have trust in people to do the right thing. I think North Korea's rockets kind of falter because the people who live in North Korea don't really like North Korea and don't really want it to prosper. And that's the other thing about freedom, is when you try to restrict people, you also restrict thought. And that's demonstrated very well with the origin of the atomic bomb.